Good morning, everyone. Very good to be here again, to see everyone. Thank you for the beautiful prayer, Abraham, and thank you, David, for sharing. If I may use some of the things you shared this morning in my lecture, that will be very good, because I really appreciate what you shared. Okay, so I'm here today to talk about youth education. So I'll be paying homage to the workers that take upon themselves this very difficult and important task. I'll be doing some campaigning. It's campaigning time. We have voting going on Tuesday, so I'm not running for anything, but I'll be campaigning for the folks who are not here working on youth education, one of whom is my wife. So she won't have the benefit of the lecture, but she trusts that I'll be representing her. Well, oh, you're here. So that's Gabriela there, so she can tell mom if I lied or not. So yeah, again, the goal is to invite everyone to reflect for a few moments about education in general, about what we learn in Spiritism, and what role do we have as educators, whether we are parents, grandparents, uncles and aunts, sons, right, brothers. So if we don't have kids of our own, we may have kids in the future, or we had kids in the past, and we know some kid, right? Either we're going to be grandparents, or again we're going to have nephews and nieces. So with that said, we want to take a few moments again to reflect upon the importance of youth education. And we're going to start by talking about a little bit of the history of the moral teachings that we have received. So as we read the books in Spiritism, we learn that we have made a lot of progress in terms of moral advancements. When Christ came to earth, that moment, the reason why he came when he came, it's because we had reached what we could call spiritual emancipation. That doesn't mean that we have mastered the morals or the moral values that we should have learned, but it indicates that Christ judged, he deemed that we had achieved enough understanding of the importance of understanding good and bad, right? That we had reached a point in our intellectual evolution where we could discern and understand the teachings and the path that he wanted us to understand to speed up our evolution. And that's why he came, right? When we read the Spirit's book, he didn't just choose, right? Say, well, it feels like a good time for me to go to earth. It was something that was deliberate. Now, he had seen the progresses that we had made. And if I can only name two, there were two specific important milestones that I think we had reached as humankind. One was the establishment of the family, the Roman family. So the Roman family structure that marked a milestone in terms of social organization. So we had finally understood the concept and the importance of family. The other one was, from an intellectual perspective, was all the, again, advancements in knowledge that we had acquired, especially in Greece, in Athens. So there were two regions of the world which had displayed concepts that would be foundational for everything that was going to happen next. The problem is, at that point, there was a lot of chaos, a lot of, I would say, the world was in a little bit of a turmoil. Rome was conquering, all the countries in the east, and there was a risk that all of those good things that we had acquired, could be destroyed. And that's when Christ, and I think it's in the, it may be in the book, either A Caminho da Luz, or I think it was in Caminho da Luz, that we read about Christ conveying kind of a counsel and saying, I gotta go there, right? It's I need to go there because this, they have made so much progress, and we are at risk of going back. So that's when Christ comes to earth, and he leaves us basically the moral code 2,000 years ago. And since then, we have been trying to understand and internalize. And again, we hear from the higher spirits, and this is interesting, right? If you think about when Kardec got in touch with Spiritism, that was not in the setting of a Christian faith. I want to point this out. He didn't go to see the phenomenon of the turning tables because he was Christian, right? There's no religious slant to those phenomena. It was just a phenomenon. So the higher spirits who then later on delivered to him the knowledge that they delivered, and and explained all the things that we learn in the codification. They could as well have said that, I don't know, Buddha was, the highest spirit on earth. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that Spiritism didn't come from a Christian, development. It became an attestation of Christianity because the higher spirits confirmed throughout. They said that Christ indeed delivered to us the most significant moral code that we could have aspired for. I hope I made myself clear. I didn't want to confuse people. I just want people to realize that, because sometimes we think that Spiritism is a branch of some church or some Christian faith. It wasn't. It was simply a set of phenomena, right, that then attracted Kardec to then become part of the work that he did and codify. And through that work, we learn that indeed Christ is who he is. Right? If you think from that perspective, it's interesting. It's very neutral, right? And gives a lot of credibility to the message that we get. So that's why I put here that the higher spirits indicate that Jesus Christ, the gospel of Jesus Christ, is the most significant moral code on the face of the earth. Because you could treat that as an independent source telling you that you can trust that message. So 2,000 years have passed by, and we've made progress. A little bit of turbulence throughout this 2,000 years. So the question is, where are we right now when we look at what we should have learned and how much progress we should have made and the opportunities that we have in front of us? So Joana de Angelis tells us something that I know it's probably not a surprise, that we have reached significant levels of advancement in science, in knowledge, but we have not done the same in terms of conscience. So I'll play with words here. I don't know I think she meant to play with words in Portuguese too, and it works well in English as well when you break up the word conscience. I hope I have spelled it right. And what she's saying is again, we have work to do, right? We have a lot of work to do still. In the area of really understanding the moral values that Christ has left us. And it also made me remember the name of the group, Conscious Living. So there's a purpose behind the name. It kind of all comes back to the same message, that is, how do we become aware? How do we gain consciousness of what we are and where we are going and what we should do? So then comes, the aspect of education, and what's the importance of education in our moral development. So Joana de Angelis, again in the book Constelação Familiar, I don't think there's one in English, Family Constellation or something to that effect. So she tells us that, again, there will never be a truly happy society until we understand the concept of integral education. And what is, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have done that. And what is integral education? Well, it's simple, right? We have tremendous institutions on earth, world-class universities that will assist us in becoming the best professionals we can become, or the best scientists we need to become. And you see that every day. You see amazing people with amazing knowledge and discoveries that we couldn't have imagined years ago. But there's no school that prepares us, any of us, to deal with some very tough challenges we face every day. Disappointments, right? How to deal with disappointments, how to deal with deception, how to deal with betrayal, how to deal with losses, right, of physical and from loved ones. How do we deal with difficult people? How do we, there isn't a school that teaches us to, instead of looking at a person who is a challenge in our lives, and whether that person is a friend, or is a significant other, or is a son or a daughter, or your boss, and instead of seeing in them a difficult person, seeing someone who needs help, someone who is in trouble, someone who is in conflict oftentimes. And what seems to be coming across as being difficult is their own difficulty in dealing with some problem that they are experiencing. And they are manifesting that when they deal with us, and we become targets of their own lack of balance. So where do you learn those things? There's no school that prepares you for that. And that's the challenge of life. The challenge of life is not to learn how to become a physicist. There are fantastic schools that will teach you that, and you will become one. The challenge of life is, how do we learn, how do we get prepared to deal with all of these difficult things that we are all going to deal with, and we all do. It's inevitable. That's life. It happens every day. And that's what Joana de Angelis is referring to as integral education, is the education that gives you that higher perspective, that broader perspective about life. Not just what you can learn from the books, but how do you prepare, how do you understand life from a perspective that allows you to deal with those situations, go through them with sanity, going through them, understanding the root causes, or the potential root causes of those situations, and being much better equipped to address those situations in a way that you and the people who are involved in those situations all benefit from it, instead of the outcome being destruction of families, destruction of friendship. Instead of that, is actually coming out of those situations much stronger, with a much clearer path, right? With that feeling that we are all learning from this situation, and we can help each other out, and we can be better people if we go through this situation in a more productive way. I'm not going to say positive. Sometimes there's little positivity in those things, but you can be productive when you deal with those things. You can turn that into an outcome that's useful for you and for those who are involved. And that's basically what Joana de Angelis says, is the lack of emotional and spiritual education, right? And this is what we can find in the Spirit Center. That's why we come here. That's why we got in touch with the Spiritist doctrine. And it's not just the Spiritist doctrine that can help us in this area. I mean, again, there's another danger of being a Spiritist, is all of a sudden only looking at the world from a Spiritist point of view, which is fantastic. But we also have to realize there are other, 6 billion people incarnate on earth, and they are all working towards progressing. They all have their merits. They don't need to be Spiritists. We need to think about this, right? There's value in a lot of good things that a lot of good people are doing. We don't have to just limit ourselves and say, I'm only going to read Spiritist book. You should be reading the codification, right? And we have our library here, and you can buy online. I mean, it's not for the lack of access, and we should educate ourselves in Spiritism by all means. But it doesn't mean that that's the only thing you need to read. Again, there's some milestone books and research in the area of psychology, and I know we have some experts here. So who am I to try and venture into that area. But I mean, I think there are some books that everybody agrees they bring a lot of clarity on difficult areas, such as emotional intelligence, right, from Daniel Goleman, or spiritual intelligence from Dana Zohar. Or there are other areas that can help us understand the complexity of being a human being and dealing with these difficult situations. And Spiritism encompasses all of that and help us provide great context to how we learn. So in this context is that I want to invite all of you to think about the children, the little ones we have. Again, it's difficult for me not to think about them. I have 4 of them, right? And again, my wife is working on youth education, and last week we had an absent teacher, so I had to fill in. So I had my little stunt as a yeah, I tell you. Terry's laughing there. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, it was interesting. I can tell you a few things about it as we go through the lecture. But it was really awakening to me to be in touch with the kids, because you don't really know, you don't really understand until you sit with them and you start discussing certain aspects of life, of everyday life, and you don't really always discuss those things at the dinner table. So it's interesting. It's a different setting. It's a very good setting. It's an ideal setting for having certain conversations. Is the youth education class. So and for us to understand actually ourselves and the role of childhood, we need to understand who the children are. And Donna Incontri, in a book called Education According to Spiritism, actually she presents a very interesting view of who the kids are. And children have a triple nature. You can look at a child and see 3 things in that individual. One is that it's an age-old spirit. It's a spirit that has centuries of experiences, many of which are dormant at that point in time. When they come to earth, something very special happens. Childhood is a very, very special period of time for the spirit, and I will delve into those things. And we're going to talk about those 3 things. So one is that, keep that in mind, that they have centuries of experience that they bring with them. The second one is that they will go through a process where they are going to develop a new personality. And you have to think about this because it's going to be very interesting. Is a spirit that brings an existing personality, but now you have 2 other elements that are going to influence that personality. One is who you are. Who you are. Now, the personality you bring with you is going to influence your new personality. But what you're going to learn in this life, and especially what you're going to learn during childhood, will be very important for your new personality. And the third one that we can never forget, we are human beings. We are incarnated in a human body. So we are also subject to the rules of biology, the rules of genetics. We have instincts. It's natural. It's inevitable. It doesn't matter where the child is born, the social condition of their parents. Every child is going to cry. Every child is going to breastfeed. So it's natural because it's part of biology, and that also plays a role because it has it brings instincts with it. So those 3 elements together will determine what the child is going to experience during especially the first 7 to 14 years of age. And those things go away. That's the funny thing. When we look at ourselves as adults, some of the conditions that are present in childhood, they are no longer there. You don't have the benefit of having certain characteristics dormant. I'm going to talk about this, and hopefully I'll make myself clear. So by having a pre-existent personality, right? So first of all, it means that we bring moral and psychological tendencies, many of which can be identified early on in life, right? You can. I mean, I was just listening to a lecture from Haroldo Dutra, and he was saying that the best way for you to learn about your child is to trade children for a day, right? Give your children to somebody else and take them, and like in the first half hour, you'll be able to list all the defects, right? All the problems that the kid have, right? We are very quick to tell all the issues that somebody else's children have, right? And it's very hard for us as parents sometimes to see those things in our own kids. But the reality is they do bring moral and psychological tendencies, some of which, again, are very mild during the first 7 years of age, right? Or even 14 years before they become teenagers, right? It's really at the teenage years that some of these deeper moral and psychological tendencies really come out, right? And that's why teenage years are sometimes so difficult, is when you have this clash between who you really are, the tendencies you bring with you, and what you've been taught during that period. So, and that explains part of why the teenage years are somewhat difficult. But we all bring those tendencies with us. Interesting too, to learn is also to remember, because remember, we've incarnated many times. We reincarnated many times. We may have gone to school several times. We may have learned math many times. So when you learn math or science in school, sometimes you're not learning it for the first time. You are relearning it. And why is so hard? Still, if we learn so many times over and over, it's still difficult. For some people, for other people, it goes like a breeze, right? They just, it's a walk in the park. It feels like they've known it all along, and like, well, why is it so difficult for me and not difficult for them? Well, because, and this is one of the blessings of reincarnation, you have an opportunity to relearn. How many times have you had this thought? I had. I'm like, oh, if I only knew that math was going to be so important in my life, I wish I could have gone back to school and paid more attention. Or history. I wish I could have paid more attention to history class, because I know nothing about history today. And boy, I wasted so much time in school. So you have those thoughts about, well, I didn't learn as much, or as I wish, or I didn't have as much joy learning. Well, guess what? We have that opportunity to come back again and go to school again and learn the same subject again. It doesn't mean that we were ignorant. It just means that sometimes that first experience was traumatizing to you, right? So that the time you learned math, before it was not as good and it's hard, and now it's hard. But now you said, now I'm going to learn. So next time, it's not as bad. Some things are just in you, and it's like it's awakening. You're just remembering stuff, and it's so easy. Some people, do so well in English or sciences, again, because they already did really well. They went many times over. They already got it. But some other areas are difficult. Again, if you had this thought of, I wish I could go back, you will go back, and you'll have a chance to learn again. So learning again is a blessing, because who are we kidding? We don't go to school one time and think we learn everything. I mean, what's the residual learning? How much do we think we have learned really out of school? Sometimes I really ask myself, I've spent many, many years at school. I'm still going to school. So I'm 43. I'll be 43 on the 21st. But I'm like, boy, I've spent so much time in school, and what have I truly learned? It's like residual, right? You learn, it's a little things that stay with you, but so we need to go back. It's a blessing. We can go back until we really learn. So that's one important aspect of reincarnation, and that's why childhood is so important. And we don't know who they are. We really don't know. We don't know who that child is that is coming to us. That child could have been, the greatest thinker of a certain area of knowledge in the past, and they are right there in our living room. You don't know. They could have been an emperor. They could have killed many people. They could have been the greatest benefactor. We don't know. That's the thing. So we got to be also asking ourselves, right, and be ready to help that individual in whatever task or mission they bring with them, because we really don't know their history, and their history can vary immensely. So the other aspect is the child is going through the development of a new personality. So here is, you have an existing personality which can be very strong. But again, God is, in His infinite wisdom, has given us the opportunity to reincarnate. And during the very first few years of incarnation, especially the first 7, that's what André Luiz tells us in many books, that the first 7 years are very important, because that's when not only we have forgotten about our previous lives, which we have. Many of us here don't recall what our previous lives were anyways. I don't. So not only you don't remember your previous life, but during the first 7 years, you also have your own personality traits dormant. Okay? So it's a double benefit, if you will, where if someone has a very strong tendency towards anger or any other moral characteristic, that will probably show up, but it's going to be very mild. So because that is the opportunity that we have as educators, whether we are parents, uncles, aunts, teachers, whatever the role we are, and whatever the role is that we're going to have with that child, that's when we can actually act upon that spirit, is when they are the most malleable, right? Because there's very little internal influence in that process. Most of the influence is external at that point. They are ready to learn. They are ready to go to school. They are ready to interact with the parents, to learn again. And it's interesting that, again, I'm not an expert, and so you can raise your hand, Sherry, and say, Eduardo, don't say that. But I don't think we realize that from earthly perspective, from a society perspective, we still don't realize. I think we are realizing, but Spiritism makes it so clear that those first few years are so important. They are a prime opportunity that we have, and we don't really give it that much importance. For many years in the history of society, children were relegated to almost non-beings, right? I mean, they didn't have a role. Nobody paid attention, in, I don't know, 2-3 centuries ago. I mean, kids were just kids. They would, be fed and be clothed and be bathed, and that was it, right? Wait until they become productive, right? Actually, I think at some point people even made a distinction, said, well, they are not productive yet. They are only productive when they become 14 and can work. Well, in many cases that was true, right? So the families had many kids, especially in the rural areas, in hopes that they would grow and help with the crops, right? So that was the view. There was no view that that child was a spirit and was there to learn. So we are awakening as well as we start to realize those aspects, right, and that opportunity. So this is when they are susceptible to external influence. As I said, they need to relearn in a new way. And the other blessing is they seem so precious and so good, right? We see kindness in them. They look at them. I mean, how can they harm you, right? So they seem imbued of a certain natural kindness, and that's what Kardec calls this innocence clothing. Let me tell you, there are exceptions. But in general, it is true, right? And this is on purpose. It is on purpose. It is so not only you don't know who that child was, not only that, so you don't have the negative, any negative aspects where you would say, "Ooh, I know this person. I know what they've done." You don't have that. Not only that, but they also look so precious that you want to care for them, and it's all on purpose, right? It's all God's plan, so that we really take those years seriously. We really take advantage of them, and we protect them, and we teach them, right? So that's why childhood is what it is. The main purpose of childhood, that's the sole purpose of childhood. Look, this kid, is to be educated again. You see, it doesn't mean that we won't be educated after all. If I may, David, I was listening to you very carefully, right? I mean, eventually we all find our path, right? And that's the beauty of incarnation, right? So it doesn't mean that if we don't take advantage of childhood, it's gone. It doesn't mean that. But maybe, maybe one would ask themselves, right? Or maybe you, David, not trying to put you on the spot, but I mean, we ask ourselves, and many parents have this dilemma about do I force my kid to have a religion, right? That's a real dilemma for many families. Is what do I do? Do I give them? And the way some great spiritists talk about it, so if you ask Eduardo or Richard Simonetti or any other educator, they will tell you that certain basic functions, it's not a matter of choice. You don't ask your kid if they want to take a shower. You don't ask them if they want to go to school. You don't ask them if they want to take medicine when they are sick. That's how they look at, let's not call it religion, let's call it giving them a moral foundation. And as you said, your dad gave you a moral foundation, so he did that anyways, right? So he didn't choose. So even if you don't have a religion, it still is the parent's task to give the child a moral foundation. Because if we lose that opportunity, it becomes that much harder. That's what it does, right? Later in life, it's going to be that much harder for us to learn, because now, once you've gone through childhood, you've gone through your teenage years, now you are awakened again. So that first benefit that we had by not having our own old personality come out, we don't have that benefit anymore. Now we are full-grown adults. We are much more aware of who we are, and now we have to deal with that. It's a much more complex structure, if you will, for us to deal with when it comes to learning new things. We are all here doing that today, so it's doable. It's just more difficult. So the point is that I'm trying to drive is childhood is truly a prime opportunity, a prime time for us to get re-educated. So the objectives of the youth education is very simply to form happier adults, fully integrated in the environments where they live and work, aware of their rights and duties, and having the gospel of Jesus as their foundation. That's what we want to do in the Spirit Center. So when Eduardo was asked, and this is in the book Seara de Luz, he was asked, what is the importance of Spiritist youth education in forming the society of the third millennium? Very simply, he says, it's of maximum importance because the childhood of today is the social element that will constitute the new humankind in the third millennium. At the dawn of the new century, the youth of today will be called to work and to responsibilities whose results will depend on their integral formation. And he goes on to say that, again, being the Spiritist doctrine, the most excellent message of all times, because it restores Jesus' words and thoughts in a way that is compatible with the advances of modern knowledge. And I think that's important. It's of all religions or of all beliefs, if you ever had to have a discussion with a child around issues, modern issues of today, right? So, and I have that with my kids all the time. And you try to explain to them why certain things are the way they are. It's a lot easier to approach that from a Spiritist point of view, I tell you, than any other belief system. So, and that's what Eduardo is saying, is Spiritism by its own design, as Kardec said, right? And Kardec always said, if science will prove anything that I say or that the Spirit said incorrect, you should accept science. That is written in our codification. He said, if there's anything that proves that what we are teaching here is incorrect, you should go with science. But so far, I'll be very honest, I don't think there's anything that Kardec has left in his books that has been proven incorrect. Because, as Kardec said, and as Eduardo says, Spiritism should be compatible with the advancements in human knowledge. It's a process where you read it every day in light of the new discoveries, and it becomes even more meaningful. And it does, actually, if you try to do that. Richard Simonetti, in his book The Power of Ideas, says that religious formation is as important as professional formation. Through a profession, we acquire the resources we need to survive. Through spiritual formation, we learn how to live. And here's the interesting thing, and I wish there was someone from from the youth education here, but you can represent them. So he has asked, how would you frame youth education within the set of activities of the Spirit Center? And he said, it's the most important. No disrespect for any other important activity, including the one I'm performing right now here. But the reality is that, as he says so well, through fraternal assistance, study, and public workshops, we help the children of yesterday, who today hurt themselves in existential deviations. Through youth education, we help the adult of tomorrow avoid those deviations. So it is, as we say, it's an opportunity to give them a head start, right? To give ourselves as spirits a head start. Instead of learning sometimes the hard way, and again, in God, in His infinite justice and mercy, He allows us to restart every day. And that's why we come here and we pick up ourselves and we start again every day. And that's how it is. But it would be nice if we could avoid a few of the bumps along the road, right? And that is what youth education can provide. And if I may, because I'm almost running out of time, I will finish with a little passage from the book Fonte Viva, right there. So it's question 157, where Emmanuel talks about children. And here's what he left us with. So when Jesus recommended not to despise these little ones, He expected of us not just measures around feeding and clothing. It is not enough to feed those minuscule mouths or to dress their cold little bodies. It is indispensable to provide the moral shelter which will assure the reborn spirit the environment of work needed for their evolution. Many parents ensure their children enjoy material comfort, but relegate their spirits to regrettable abandonment. The idleness in the streets is a factory of delinquents who will end up in prison or mental institutions. But the spiritual recklessness in the heart of their home, creates social demons of perversity and madness who, in many cases, propelled by money or position power, cross over large bands of the centuries, spreading misery and suffering, darkness and ruin, with deplorable impunity in the face of the earthly justice. Do not despise, therefore, the children, leaving them at the mercy of the impulses of the animal instincts. Remember that each of us are in the process of education and re-education in front of our Divine Master. The food plate is essential for the development of the body. But let us not forget that as incarnate spirits, we need more than just food. Let us be reminded of the spiritual nutrition of the little ones, through our attitudes and examples, coaching and corrections in a timely fashion, since morally abandon them today amounts to undermining their ability to perform the divine tasks that they will be called to carry out in the future. And that's what I had to share today. Thank you.